onto the stage. In this track, we will have the keynote speech by Ms. Itai Matamombe, co-founder of Oceanics. Now, we will also be joined by Professor Han-seok Lee and Mr. Jung Hyun, as well as Professor Hwa Cheol for the panel discussion. Please welcome them with a big hand. I'd like to ask all those members for track 2 onto the stage. Ms. Itai Matamombe of Oceanics of the United States. Well, she served as the first global health care advisor to the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and she was also a diplomat in Zimbabwe. And she co-founded Oceanics, a development company for floating ocean, and her presentation will be on the floating city, the unity to fight against sea level rise.
연설자분을 앞으로 모시겠습니다.
That was not a very big round of applause. Let's try again. Come on, come on, come on.
다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to be here, distinguished guests, and we will begin with a video of our floating city. Thank you for watching. Our fate as people is inseparable from the fate of the ocean. We need the ocean to sustain our planet. But the ocean is under threat. We are under threat as human beings. And this is the reason why Oceanics, our company, together with UN Habitat and the city of Busan, have offered an innovative solution to deal with climate adaptation and the threats that we are facing. Why would anyone build a city on water? You might be asking. My own mother is asking. And there are many credible reasons, and I will be happy to share some of them with you. Coastal cities around the world have a problem because when they run out of land, they have nowhere to expand. And from UN Habitat, we learned that 3 million people are moving to cities every week, 3 million people every week. And most of these cities are coastal cities. And coastal cities have nowhere to expand so that they can meet this influx of new people, to give them shelter, food, energy, and all of the other things that cities need to provide. So this is a huge challenge. Just take a look at that image. And this challenge is now being compounded by climate change and sea level rise. Truly, coastal cities are at the forefront of climate change and sea level rise. 90% of the largest cities in the world are vulnerable to sea level rise. There's not a day, not quite a day, that's an exaggeration, but a significant period that goes by where we don't hear in the news about flooding somewhere, Florida. We've just gone through that. And this is a serious challenge. Billions worth of infrastructure around the world is being destroyed due to flooding because of sea level rise. But most importantly, human beings are being displaced because of this issue. and sea level rise is creating climate refugees around the world. And the issue of people living and being displaced from their homes is beyond just finding new shelter. They leave behind their networks, they leave behind their culture, they leave behind their livelihoods and the graves of their ancestors and everything that they have known. And often they are going to hostile places that don't necessarily welcome them. When coastal cities run out of land, often they resort to land reclamation to create new land. And this is extremely damaging to the ocean. Land reclamation really is a polite way of saying you create new land by dumping debris and sand into the ocean, decimating everything that is in the way. And often you kill the ocean at 2 points, where you get the debris that you deposit and where you deposit it. And really, it makes no sense in this environment where sea level rise is a threat, because you are ever more close to the ocean and more vulnerable. Land reclamation takes long, it's expensive, and you're susceptible to liquefaction if there's an earthquake. And this is why Oceanics, the City of Busan, and UN Habitat are proposing floating infrastructure as a solution for climate adaptation and sustainable coastal expansion. As you can see from this picture, the city is floating above the surface of the water, and it's anchored to the seabed, so it does not float away. And on top, you have the buildings that are built. So this is a profile of what the city would look like. So essentially, we are creating new land. We are creating floating real estate for coastal cities to be able to expand sustainably onto the ocean. Because preaching that coastal cities should stop land reclamation will not stop it. Though countries are making great strides, China has banned commercial land reclamation. Citizens no longer accept this. We've seen demonstrations in Hong Kong against land reclamation, and we believe this is a viable solution to create new land. And what we are talking about is not just about technology and building floating infrastructure from a technological perspective, but this is really about redefining how human beings can create new communities to live together. You will see that on our teams, we have experts ranging from artists, sustainability experts. We've thought about the full range, and community experts. How will people live together as healthy communities, productive communities, and creating new cities where we actually know who our neighbors is, versus just tall buildings where we are isolated and alone. And this is what the city looks like from the bottom. So essentially, we are learning to live in harmony with nature and with the ocean. And we came from the ocean, and we are going back to the ocean. And the closer we are to the ocean, the more we will learn to care about it. Here is, you can see that underneath, we are growing coral. We can grow coral reefs from scratch through bio-rock, which is a technology that our company utilizes. And we can employ 3D ocean farming and other measures to actually regenerate the marine ecosystem wherever we are, instead of decimating it through land reclamation. And what is beautiful about this is that we can scale this innovation. Look at how much water we have on the planet. And so this is the smallest unit of an oceanic city, and this is what we call the neighborhood. It's 2 hectares, and you can have up to 300 people living on it. And 6 of these neighborhoods grow into a village, and 6 of these villages grow into a city of 10,000 people. What is also amazing about floating infrastructure, unlike building on land, is that you can reconfigure what you build because of the way that it is built and anchored to the seabed. Suppose you built a school or a hospital in a place and it no longer works for your needs, you can actually unplug the entire city, or you can unplug part of the city and move the school to another position. So this is a living city that responds and listens to the need of citizens, unlike building on land where once you build, that is the way it is. And longer term, which you would not try to do every time, if really there was a reason to move the entire city somewhere, you could unplug the entire city and move it elsewhere if conditions have changed. But what this also means is that we can deploy this in emergency situations. We could tow in housing when there's an earthquake. We could tow in schools where they are needed. We could tow in hospitals where they are needed. So this is one of the things that I find very exciting about floating infrastructure. This is a vision of the world's first sustainable floating city prototype, Oceanics Busan. We are really grateful to be working together with the city of Busan to develop this and UN Habitat. We unveiled this at the UN in April, at the second UN roundtable, what this looks like. And it captivated the imagination of the world. This was covered all around the world in every major media, worthy of 250 million of media. And this is amazing, and it shows that people are paying attention to what Busan is doing, and Busan is really leading on this. And why did we choose Busan? When we had the first roundtable with the UN in April of 2019, we had an outcome that we needed to build a prototype with the city. And we debated and analyzed 10 cities that we could work with, and Busan quickly rose to the top. Number one, because Busan is a credible maritime city and has a lot of experience, a lot of naval architecture, marine engineering skills that are applicable to what we're doing. And another reason is also that has really stood in the way of developing floating infrastructure, because this is not a new idea. Smarter people than us have thought about it. But you need a government or political leadership and someone enthusiastic to champion this. And Mayor Park of Busan has really proven to be that champion for us, to be that champion not just for us, but in Busan, but for the entire world, because this is being developed for coastal cities around the world. And ultimately, also, it is really about the people, anything that you do. And Korea has a history of developing industries and dominating them around and leading. And so we felt that for a new technology such as this, under the leadership of the UN, that Korea would be the right place for us to develop this with the city of Busan. And we're so grateful for the opportunity. And these are some of the principles that we considered as we were building this city. We learned from the city of Busan itself, and sustainability and community habitat regeneration, all of these are important principles. We even learned from nature in the hexagon shape that we borrowed from the bees because of the efficiency in design. And all of our systems are closed loop and zero waste. So this means that nothing goes into the ocean. For example, if we utilize some water and it turns into that water, we can then feed to our gardens which then produce food for us. So the whole thing is closed loop. It keeps circling within. And I think that this is a beautiful way to live and a beautiful way to be. So there's a lot of emphasis on sharing as a community. And so this is a committed community that cares about living in harmony with nature and life below water. And our platforms are quite versatile. So here are the different things that you could do with the design of the platform. This is specifically focused on Busan. And there will be research, blue tech innovation and research that is going on this platform. This is very important. People will be able to live on this platform and normal families. People will also be able to visit the floating city short term. They may not be able to stay there long term, but they can come and go and share in the experience and spread the good news. And look at this. This is what a floating city or a marine city looks like. It's just like a normal city. Grandmas playing with their grandchildren, collecting flowers, gardening, nothing unusual. Beautiful people hanging out, and you can see the architecture is quite inspired by Busan and Korea. And this is what it looks like. It has the potential to grow, and Busan is leading in this. Korea is leading the world in this. Even though this is being developed in Busan and in Korea, it is a global partnership, speaking about the theme of partnership. And truly, our team is from all around the world, from Europe, from Africa, from the United States, here in Korea, parts of Asia. And this is really exciting and also speaks to the power of what technology can do in this era. And here we hope that this technology will move to the Middle East. Here is an application of what it might look like in the Middle East. Here is what it could look like in Africa. And this is in Europe. You can have a floating city in winter, no problem. And of course, other parts of Asia and Pacific Islands are very, very critical too, because some of them are facing an existential crisis. And if we can provide floating infrastructure for them as an alternative, then this will make a tremendous difference. And I just want to end by saying that we are convinced that humanity living on water is not only inevitable, it's imminent. People are talking about going to colonize Mars and live in Mars, and we wish them luck. And we love the space guys. They make us look sane talking about living on Mars. If you look at this, you can easily see that the ocean makes up more than 71% of the planet. This is a tremendous resource. The ocean literally has everything that we need to meet our shelter needs, our energy needs, our food needs, our mobility needs. And so it is inevitable that humanity will move onto the ocean. And we want to do that and set an example with Busan of doing this in a sustainable way under the leadership of the UN and set the right example. So this is not just about printing real estate. No, this is about the future of how humanity can live together, how we can organize ourselves. Do we think that it would be an easy task? No. But no new technology has ever been easy to implement. But with the partnerships that we have and the unity that we have around the oceans, we are confident that Busan and Korea will deliver this for the world. Thank you so much for your time.
We thank you so much for the wonderful keynote speech, giving the very insight into our second track. And 다시 한번
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Itai Matamombe. Please give her a big round of applause for her insightful keynote speech. We wanted to hear more from her. That is why we'd like to have this panel discussion for track 2. And the session will be moderated by Professor Hwa Cheol of Korea Maritime and Ocean University. And Professor Song earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in architectural engineering from Yonsei University and his doctorate degree in civil engineering from Stuttgart University in Germany. Thank you very much for your presence here. Now I'd like to hand the floor over to Professor Song for the panel discussion. Please give a big round of applause. Good afternoon. I am Hwa Cheol Song, a moderator for this track 2 panel discussion on the climate crisis and floating city. In track 1, held a discussion on Ocean Expo 2030. And we just had the keynote presentation by Ms. Itai Matamombe, co-founder of Oceanics. And her presentation introduced the floating city and floating structure presentation. And I'd like to thank her for her punctuality so that we have the time for panel discussion. And I think this really intrigued your curiosity and imagination, this concept of floating city. And we might be seeing this kind of city off the coast of Busan. That's quite exciting. If we work together, and I believe our dreams will come true, and I believe we are all into this together. The floating city, as explained by the keynote speaker, is in advanced technology to respond to the rising sea level. And I think this is a modern day of the Ark of Noah. And we are joined for the panel discussion by Professor Han-seok Lee of Korea Maritime and Ocean University, as well as Mr. Jung Hyun of Ocean Space. We do not have enough time, so let us move directly into the panel discussion. And I'd like to start with Professor Lee's comment on the floating city prototype for about 7 to 8 minutes, which will be followed by Mr. Jung Hyun and any ideas for the future directions. And if time allows, I would like to turn to Ms. Itai Matamembe for her closing remarks. And that's how we will run this panel discussion for track 2. Now I'd like to turn to Professor Lee for his comment. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Floating city. I think the study has begun quite a long time ago. I think over the past 10 years or so, we have conducted a research into floating city concept. Many people were involved in this technology, believing that this will be a reality at some point. Then I'm so great to see the feasibility of this idea at this larger scale forum, global forum. Which part of the floating city should I be focused on? Which will be an important point. I gave it a thought as I prepared for this panel discussion. Well, as you know, the Busan is a coastal city. And there are many coastal cities. And I believe a floating city should be understood in connection with the coastal cities. The idea of building a city floating on the ocean is to tackle the challenges facing coastal cities. From the end of 1950s, throughout the globe, various ideas have been proposed in order to address the challenges facing the coastal cities. And building a city in the ocean, well, actually represented some utopia. So this is a realization of our dreams, long sought after dreams. I think, well, our approach should be based on our proper understanding of the coastal cities. That would be the proper way for us to design a floating city. The foundation of the coastal cities is the ocean as a resource. You can look at the ocean from various perspectives, but my understanding of the ocean is in space. As the keynote speaker mentioned, most of the coastal cities do not have a space to further expand. They have this shortage of land. So how to make the most of the ocean as the extension of the cities? This is quite critical to ensure sustainability of the coastal cities. So the coastal cities are making efforts to utilize the ocean as the space of their living and life in a sustainable manner. In addition to that, we should have a fresh view on the ocean. So far, our approach has been land-centric, even for coastal cities. I jokingly say that when I have a meeting with a professor based in Seoul, I say that if Seoul is a coastal city, what would have happened? I think the concept of city would have been completely different, and there would be heightened level of respect for coastal cities. So at least For Busan, the coastal city, we should have an ocean-centric approach. That should be how we view the land. And second, we need to have a clear vision as two cities, encompassing not just land but also the ocean. How to sustainably make the most of the ocean space. These are the questions we should propose, and the floating city was proposed as an answer to those questions. A floating city has incorporated advanced technologies, but since it is surrounded by the ocean, the city is rather unique. Since it is a floating city, it might have some influences emotionally and in terms of their livelihood and economically and financially. We should consider these aspects and attributes in building a floating city. In particular, as for a floating city, it has a great potential to be sustainable. There are various renewable energy sources we can utilize for the power generation for the floating city. And Korea is surrounded by mountains. So in order to build a city in the middle of the country, we do not have any other option but to destroy mountains and lumber trees. But as we have seen in the image of the Oceanics Busan, as for the floating city, you can reconfigure and you can put together different units to form a village or to form a city. And if one unit got antiquated, then you can replace that one unit with a new one to extend the lifespan of a city. So, considering all these aspects, I believe the floating city is the way for a coastal city like Busan to make the most of the ocean in a creative manner and build a new city for the future. So I believe this is a brilliant idea for Busan to explore. We have this plan to build Oceanics Busan, which was presented at UN in April. And this project, to be successful in Busan, I believe there are three prerequisites we have to address. The first is site. Since this is a floating city, its relationship with the existing coastal city should be considered. And the various physical characteristics as well as the climate conditions of the ocean should be taken into consideration in selecting a site, but that is easier said than done. This is not something a one decision maker can do. So I believe a proper siting should be studied thoroughly. And the second is social consensus. The citizens should have a better understanding as to the floating city, and there should be a social consensus that now is the time for us to introduce this concept of floating city. And the third prerequisite is legislation. We need to have laws and regulations in order to introduce this concept. This is the end of my comment. Thank you.
네, 이한숙 교수님.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for your comment. So, as you know, the 70% of the Earth is the sea. So, making use of the oceanic space is something that we really have to pay heed to. So, I hope that there will be more and growing discussions on how to utilize ocean spaces. And also, he talked about the need for social consensus. And oftentimes, I said that the marine space is a public good. So how to make use of them, in determining that, I think social consensus is critical, although the Minister Cho is no longer with us. But I think this is something that we have to ask to him, so which is the legal framework. So I hope that all these things will be in place so that we can have a successful floating city here in Busan. Now, Mr. Chung Hyun. Yes, good afternoon. I am Chung Hyun, CEO of Ocean Space. Today, I would like to introduce to you the floating island on the Han River of Seoul, because among the existing buildings, I believe it presents a glimpse that's closest to what will happen with the Busan floating city. So this floating island has been under operation for more than 10 years now. It's a floating facility established on the river, and what Oceanics plans for, so the floating city, it's going to be situated in the Busan Bukang port. And Busan Bukang port is also surrounded by hinterland and other hilly areas. So pretty similar with the floating island of Seoul. And although it's situated on the river, so you may think that the river is not as dangerous at sea. But the Han River, it has a very wide, big width, over 1 meter wave, and also flow speed. During the float, it goes up to 3 meters per second. And also the fluctuation is pretty severe between the normal time and the flooding time. So in the sense, the environment is hostile, maybe as hostile as the ocean environment. Some of you may not be familiar with the floating island. It's located in the southern part of the Pampo Bridge of the Han River, and the construction was complete in 2011 with a cost of around 74 billion won. The floating island consists of the 3 floating structures constructed with steel, as well as connecting bridges that connect the 3 floating structures. So you can see the picture here. And for its architecture design, so it has the shape of the flower blown on the Han River that goes in harmony with the surrounding environment. Now this is the drawing. So here you see the 3 islands. So we call it island number 1, 2, and 3. So the first island, that's the largest one, and this is called Island Vista. And its floor area is about 4,700 square meter, and it's 3-story building above ground with 25 meter in height. And inside, it consists of the multiple purpose hall, cafeteria, and some retail stores. Island 2, so which is closer to the Pampo Bridge. This is called Island Viva, and it has a floor area of 3,300 square meter. Again, same 3-story building with 20 meter in height. And inside of it, there are culture experience zone, cafe, and bar. And the third island, which is situated in the middle of the river, it's called Terra. It's the smallest, with the floor area of 1,200 square meter, and it has a 2-story building with 12 meter in height. It has leisure facilities, clubhouse, and retail stores. The total area of the 3 islands, including the connecting bridge, that spans around 10,000 square meter. Here again, you see the drawing, 2D drawing. So there are 3 islands on the surface, but under the sea, there are very complicated mooring facilities. Why? Because these floating facilities, they should be kept in the right place regardless of the weather abnormalities. Otherwise, they will be carried away. So in order to prevent that, we have to have a mooring facility. So for example, like on the Han River, sometimes strong wind or gust can blow anytime. And we have a 3-story building here. And so with the strong wind, the island could be drifted sideways. And also if there is a heavy downpour in the upstream area, then it can lead to flood and high river level with the increase in flow velocity as well as the current load. So in order to prevent floating facilities from being carried away to the downstream, there must be strong mooring facilities to buttress them up. And during the normal operation, so we have the mooring chain, anchor system, and real-time winch system. So regardless of the wind velocity, winch system provides a very precise control on a real-time basis to keep the movement of the floating structures within 1 meter range, and therefore people inside cannot really feel any kind of impact. And also during the emergency situations such as flood, the winch system releases the structure, and the floating structure will be held only by the mooring chain and anchor system. And also, if there is really a heavy flood that could hit the bridge, it can lead to a serious accident. So in order to ensure accident-proof protection, and also to prevent the breaking of the mooring chain, we adopted the so-called 3-layer safety system. So I think that the natural disaster can occur in Busan, and that's why we have to take into consideration and come up with very meticulous design for the mooring system to ensure full safety. And this is another drawing. So the blue indicates the sea level in the normal operation, and red indicates the water level during the flood. So you can see that the water level goes up very significantly during the flood. Sometimes the islands can move 9 meters downstream due to a high current load that may occur during the flood. And then it can collide with other islands as well. And therefore, in order to avoid that collision, sufficient separation distance should be secured. So if Bukang has multiple floating structures, then you have to thoroughly review how far a floating structure can move during the typhoon or other floods to ensure foolproof safety. And also the floating island, it's a waterfront cultural space. It offers Seoul citizens with a space for enjoy cultural activities, as well as it works as a landmark. So it provides a resting place for citizens in the midst of the busy urban area. As you know, nowadays shopping malls have become very popular, and people shop, dine, and enjoy culture all in the same shopping mall. And so nowadays, we see increasing number of visitors during the weekends in these shopping malls. So the floating island, although it's small, but we also have large crowd visiting every weekend. But compared to the general shopping malls, the floating island, it offers a open outdoor space where people can enjoy both nature and shopping and dining and everything. That's why it's very popular among the citizens. This is the nightscape of the nightscape. And so when the floating city is established in the Busan port, I hope that you can also create a beautiful nightscape to serve as a landmark that represents the Busan city. So in that sense, I hope that we can have the floating city in Busan, which will be a landmark. And also I hope that we can have the large-scale yacht marina in Busan. So because these are the public facilities, so they will provide convenience and also the pleasure, not just to Busan citizens, but also to the visitors of Busan. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Changhyun, for your insightful comment. When we first talk about floating city, I mentioned that this is dreams come true. But in an ordinary setting, well, many people ask, how is it possible for a city to float? But since we have so many experts in the area of shipbuilding and oceans, I think well, many people have a very high level of existing understanding as to the floating city. So this is technically feasible, as confirmed by Mr. Chang Hyun. And we have the floating island in the Han River, and it has been safe and functions as a building. So I think well, this is the confirmation as to that fact. I think, well, safety is the most important factor when it comes to the floating city, and I believe this can be addressed successfully as well. We have a little bit of time to turn to Ms. Itai Matamembe for her final comment.
Thank you very much. As an African, I really believe that I should not speak after my wise elders have spoken. And truly, it's an injustice and an embarrassment that I gave the keynote in your presence. Even before we founded the company Oceanics and had the agreement with Busan, we were translating your papers online, Professor Song, Professor Lee, learning from the work that you have been doing for many, many years. This is truly like a culmination of your dreams, and we're just so grateful to be a part of it, and we're grateful to be part of the same team with you. And so I just really want to end by saying that Korea is really the perfect place for this to happen. We didn't know that we were coming to Busan or Korea when we were studying the work that you did. And when you look at these two men sitting here on the stage, and yourself as well, because you actually have the living proof, they are pioneers in the industry, respected everywhere around the world. And sometimes people say a prophet is not without honor, but in their own country. And so I just really want to bear witness to the greatness of all of you and pioneering this industry. And I think it fits perfectly that we get the opportunity to do this in Busan, and I hope to continue to learn from you. You've been great mentors, great friends, and in moving forward with this dream that we share with all of you. So really, let me just say thank you, and be a good African and not speak after my elders. Thank you so much.
전혀 각본에 없는 이야기를 하셔가지고.
So thank you very much. Thank you for such a compliment. Thank you very much. Truth be told, yes, Korea is #1 in shipbuilding and also in semiconductor industry. But for marine, especially the development sector, I think Korea is a little bit lagging behind. But 20 years ago, I went to Japan and learned their expertise, and I've been in this field for about 20 years. And somehow, now I've found that Korea has one of the top class marine engineers, including the Mr. Chung Hyun. So I'm very thankful to the Itai Matamembe for selecting Busan as the host of the floating city. And I think that the Busan's expertise and expertise of the marine engineers have actually contributed to her choice. So now is the time for me to make the concluding remarks. As you know, the climate crisis, it really requires a whole world global cooperation and concerted efforts. And in this field, the Busan Metropolitan Government is now pursuing the floating city development project. And by doing so, it actually exerts its leadership. So I feel very proud of that. And also for this prototype project, So now I'm very pleased to promote this project at this World Ocean Forum and also through the Busan Daily newspaper. So as a citizen of Busan, as well as an expert in this field, I strongly support this project. If possible, I sincerely hope that the 2030 World Expo will take place in Busan. And as mentioned by the Ms. Itaimata Mumba, the model for the floating city for Busan, I hope that this dream could really become a reality in year 2030 when Busan hosts the World Expo. I hope that this floating city will be a landmark for the Busan World Expo in 2030 so that everyone in the world will watch that. And also, this will be remembered as a historic building for the entire world. So with that, we would like to conclude the track 2 panel discussion session. Thank you very much for your contribution.
해양 도시의 미래를
Well, this was a session that we could look into the future of the floating city. I could see that we have such a great project going on, and we could feel the passion and dedication of those who are in the field. I'd like to thank all the panelists, the presenter, as well as the moderator. The Expo and the floating city. And in track 2, we had a discussion on the topic of climate crisis and the floating city. Those two agendas are the timely topics for the hyper-ocean era. And I believe other sessions of World Ocean Forum will cover various other relevant topics. I'd like to ask for your continued interest and support and participation. This concludes World Ocean Forum's opening ceremony. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.
잠시 장례 정리 후에 해양인의 밤 행사가 이어집니다.
We will soon start the Korea Marine Honors Network Night once the stage becomes ready. So, and this is only for those who are invited or those who have the red name card. But and also in the pearl room there is a reception. So before we have the Korea Marine Honors Network Night, we are going to have a reception event. And then please come back.